Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear Jean-Claude Eloy, yesterday evening we had the chance to experience the first German performance of the newest work of Jean-Claude Eloy, La Minuit de la Foi, The Midnight of Faith. It was a great experience, and today we have the joy to speak with Jean-Claude Eloy about his music, his thoughts about music. I would like to begin with a general question. The work of that we listened to yesterday is called The Midnight of Faith, inspired by this book of Edith Stein about the mystic of St. John of the Cross, about the Noche Oscura dell'Alma, the dark night of the soul. In this sense, your piece is a meditation about the midnight, about darkness, but also about light in darkness and darkness in light, so to say. As this is typical for you, to have this dialectical relationship between opposites, light and darkness in this case, since you are also a reader of the pre-Socratic philosophy. You esteem very much Heraclit, for example. But I would like to know something more about the title of the composition, The Midnight of Faith. What do you mean with that? It's a quotation of Edith Stein, of course.
But it's a quotation, yes, it's a quotation from her directly.
Yeah.
So the expression is not my expression, it's an expression of her.
But you, as composer, what do you mean with your sound, with this expression, the midnight of faith?
No, I found this image beautiful as a poetic image for me, and this is one of the characteristics which I appreciate on reading her book, She is not only a philosopher, but she has a certain quality of poetical image for writing her book, And that inspired me because I have all those layers of different light, shadows or different things, etc. So when reading that book, I had the feeling of being visiting an exhibit by painter like Renoir and Peter, where they use a lot of metamorphoses of colors, where light has an important role in making the object appear and disappear, etc. So I found her image very aesthetical for me. And so I took the phrase without thinking further, what does it mean, but with an instinct of poetry and making sound in that direction, having a lot of sounds which are clear, which are unclear, which are masked, which appear suddenly, etc. So that was an inspiration of that direction. I did not search to interpret it in a sort of rational way.
Yes. But about faith, I would like to know something in general. For you, as composer, what is the faith of the composer Jean-Claude Eloy?
No, my faith is sound, just simply. I have no faith because I am totally interested since many years about religion. I have been interested in Buddhism, in Hinduism, in Taoism, in Sufism, and so when coming back in Europe, I wanted also to be interested on the religion of Europe, and so I said to myself, I have to make a contribution on the material which is from my own country or near country.
Yes. But you cannot deny that since the 70s, you have a very deep interest for mystically inspired texts, so to say. Although you are an atheist,
yeah, generally, yes. I have no specific belief.
But you have a fable, a great fascination for such type of text. For example, for Aurobindo, Hazrat Khan, and not at least Teresa from Avila, and then Edith Stein, and so on. And I would like to ask you, is there, I think that there is a connection between the mystical experiences described by such authors and the kind of experiences that one can do through listening to your music. There is a sort of kind of affinity also with the quality of your sounds, also with long sustained sounds, with the very dense and overwhelming sound texture, where the listener almost, so to say, disappears in the sound. And this is a kind of mystical experience, if you want.
Yes, well, that came all along my way. You know, when I was a young composer, I did not search in such a specific direction. As a composer from the conservatory or as a student of Pierre Boulez, I was looking at composition in a more abstract way, more constructivist way. I have been for a while a sort of post-serialist composer when I was a direct student of Pierre Boulez, and I got a certain success as a direct student of Boulez, to such a point that most of the people in Paris were thinking, oh, then Boulez has a son, and it will grow that way, you know. But then, since my youth, I have been traveling in different countries. My sister, when I was young, took me in India when I was 18 or 19. So I read about India culture, etc. And I got very interested about this spirituality. But for me, the spirituality is not only religion. For me, spirituality is something which belongs to the human being first at all. And to enlarge the spirituality became progressively one of my main concern. And so I wanted to express that in my music. This is why when I came back from America in the 70s, when I came back to France, I decided I want this philosophical interest I have in India to materialize in some ways in my music. And so this is how I composed Kamakala, 71, and that work had an immense impact at the first performance in Paris, you know, because most of the critics, they said, oh, but he came back from America, but he's completely metamorphosed. Yes. He's not anymore the student of Pierre Boulez, he's doing something else. So the opinions were diverse, but most of the people say, well, we consider it's an interesting evolution. You know? So, but then I had the chance to be invited by Stockhausen for doing my first electronic piece, just the year after, in 72, you know. And when I discovered the electronic sound, I did not know the electronic sound. It was my first experience. But when I began to work intensively in the studio of the VDR, I discovered this capacity of electroacoustic sound to take your attraction or your mental attraction into the sound and to listen in deep about the constitution of this sound. And so I discovered that the time can be enlarged. You know, I told you when I did this experience, I had a sound made in the studio which I liked, and I wanted to record several minutes of material, as we do usually, you know. And I started the recording, and I thought, well, maybe 3 or 4 minutes are finished. I look at the clock, it was more than 12 minutes, you know. So I said to myself, there must be something in those sounds,
yes. Something was
which are transforming the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it was reinforced by a study I made before. At the time of Kamakala, I was invited to make a lecture, and I made a research about traditional non-European music. I worked with Professor Émile Lepp, who was an excellent acoustician in France. You know. He was the responsive director of the Laboratory of Acoustic in a university. You know. And I gave to him several sampling of flamenco music, Morocco call to prayer, Mauritanian traditional music, then Middle East traditional music, or Kaltoum, I gave him, then Indian classical music, and particularly the Daga brothers, which I like very much, the Drupad singing, you know. And then it went on to finally to Japan music, you know. And I gave to him all those sampling, trying to get what we called at this time a sonogram, which was a machine which turned and would burn the paper on the spectrum of the sound, you know. And so when you got these few seconds of sound, you could get the spectrum, the fundamental and the harmonic, etc. And what I discovered from that research is that the secret of most of the non-European music was in the constitution of the sound.
Yes.
Because
yes.
these music generally are monophonic,
Yes.
but they are very interesting to listen. So why is a monophony so interesting to listen? While when we do monophony in the Western countries, we are sometimes disappointed. It must be very, very well invented melodically to be interested. You know. So we have lost this capacity of ornamentation of the sound.
Yes.
You know. And I said in that lecture that the secret of the non-Western music is in their capacity of keeping the ornamentation of the sound as a very strong parameter, active parameter. In some sonogram from the Daga brothers, between a vibrato and an ornamentation, you have all degrees of enlargement and shortening, you know. So this is a science that we have progressively lost in the Western countries, and I tried to explain in that lecture that probably it came from the Western Church when, the original singing in the church came from the Middle East.
Yes.
And certainly in the Middle Age, people were singing with some kind of Middle East ornamentation. And then there was a reform made by a pope, to try to clean.
Make a purification.
Yes, a purification of the... a purification of the sound. And then, so we got... that was the start of the counterpoint, because when you get a sound, and Professor Émile Lepp told me, when you get a sound which is a pure sound, the ideal in the church is to have the angel voice, and the angel voice is a sinus. Yes. And when you have a sound which is a sinus, after a few seconds, it's boring. Because there is no renewal of information. Yeah. So he said to me, this is the reason, and I agreed totally with him, why when we have a purification of the sound, we need to go to another tone. So we put one point to another point, and that means point contre point, counterpoint. That is the reason of having the counterpoint born in Western countries, it is this purification of the sound, which needs a lot of combination of the sound to become interesting. So I had all those ideas at the time of Kamakala, and I tried to expose them. And so they truly realized themselves, showed me themselves when I was in the electronic studio. Because when you have a sound in the electronic studio which is rich enough, you need a certain time to understand the sound. If it is rich enough, it has many events inside itself, and the fact that there are many events needs a certain extension of the time.
Yes. Yeah, and in a certain sense, the extreme consequence of this process of acoustical purification of the sound was in the music of the 20th century, the pointillistic style, the point music, the so-called punctuelle musique.
Probably, yes.
And in a certain sense that you, above all, from the beginning of the 70s, you went in a totally other direction than the point music.
Yeah.
Especially with the use of long sustained sounds.
But you know, it was a tendency, generally speaking, because at this time I had the opportunity to speak a little bit with Stockhausen.
Yes.
And he was criticizing this punctualism systematic. You know, he was rebelling, in fact, against this post-Darmstadt type of music, you know, which he helped to be born in the 50s. But then he wanted to have it growing to something else, you know. And so we became critical with this pointillistic type of style. You know. I remember when I was going very often in Paris to the Domaine Musical concert when I was young. I remember some concerts where the pianist come and perform a piece, you know, and then so, you know, after a few seconds you wonder where there is a new sound coming, you know, because in a few seconds it covers all the register, all the attack, all the intensity. And so the pieces are short because, of course, they cannot be long pieces, you know. They are 2 or 3 minutes piece, and then enough, and salute, close the piano, and go away, you know. And I became frustrated to hear this type of music. Really.
Yes, and beginning with Kamakala, you began to work also with this slow development of the sounds.
Yeah, because what I like in the traditional Indian music was that the raga, you know, which comes to you ensconce yourself in a certain modal scale, and progressively it animates itself, more and more ornamentation, etc., and the musicians go on. And I remember I liked very much at this time one of the what is the name? Not the sitar, but the other instruments. Sarod. Sarod, yes. I forgot the name of this Indian. But he was Ali Akbar Khan, no. Ali Akbar Khan, maybe.
Yes.
He was accelerating very much all the ending part of raga. Yeah. So the distance in dynamic was from very, very slow to extremely high at the end of the record, you know. And that I like, I appreciate this.
Yeah, and this is, so to say, also an archetypical gesture of your music, this slow and gradual growth of the sound method. And we have this also in À l'approche du feu méditant, or in Kamakala, and many other pieces.
But I think the best example is Kamakala for that point of view. Yeah.
Well, what you say remembers me also to a very interesting footnote in a book of Pierre Schaeffer, À la recherche d'une musique concrète. And in this footnote, he says that for him there was a very clear affinity between musique concrète, or in a general sense, electroacoustic music, and the so-called primitive music. And he meant with primitive music the music of non-Western cultures.
Sure.
And I think that you could agree with this statement of Pierre Schaeffer, because in the approach with sound, the electroacoustic composer and primitive musicians have a very common idea.
But I disagree with the qualification of primitive
Yes,
musician,
primitive.
because in fact,
it's not
most
of
those musicians are not at all primitive, and they are extremely refined.
But primitive in a etymological sense, as something primordial, originary.
Yeah, primordial.
Yes.
But it was the same in the painting movement or sculpting new movements.
Yes, with the music, art brut, for example. These primitivistic tendencies.
And the discoloration of Africa for many
with
painters, sculptors, etc.
Yes, of course. But you spoke often also about the affinity of the experimental music and the non-Western music traditions, because both are, so to say, musical minorities in our world. And these musics are, so to say, in extinction, and they are very minorities, and therefore you say that it will be necessary that they alliate, so to say.
That type of thinking came to me when I was involved in Japan, when I lived in Japan. After I finished Gaku-no-Michi in Tokyo, I was proposed by the National Theatre to compose for the gagaku orchestra. And I knew gagaku music since long, but I was very interested by the project. I accepted immediately. But when I was back in Paris, I discovered that the gagaku instruments are always in a sort of high area, one octave and a half or something like that. So I wrote to them, I find it a little bit small range to compose a long piece. Could I have something else? So I proposed them to have lower instruments, in the same family, alti instruments or bass instruments, and we could ameliorate the grouping of instruments with what we call the o-ichiriki. You have the ichiriki, which is sort of oboe, but then you have the o-ichiriki, which is at the fourth down, which is sort of alto ichiriki, which is a superb instrument. Yes. And then they proposed me also to use the o-sho, which is the one octave down the sho, the mouth organ. So, but even with that combination, I was not satisfied. So I proposed first to multiply the orchestra with the pre-recording orchestra, With the gagaku at this time was 27 instrumentalists. And I had been reading in books, history books of Japan, that in the Middle Age, sometimes they could have in a full open air concert in Nara, where there were 100 ichiriki, 100 sho, 100 ryuteki playing together, So I said, this is Berlioz's dream of a gagaku. But the National Theatre, they said to me, no, recording, pre-recording combination with the live sound is not possible. So then they said, we can offer you monks, monk singer. Buddhistic monks, So I knew the music of Shômyô singing, which is the traditional temple singing of different sects. But I said, I am interested, but how could I compose something really for them? So they organized later a visit, and I could meet several responsible high monks of those choruses. We had a rather long conversation, exchange of ideas, etc. How could we work together? And at the moment in the conversation, I took a paper, I draw a line like that. I said, well, can you sing me that? And they sang immediately something quite close to the graphic I wrote. So I said no. So now we have a way of communicating. I shall do the whole score with that graphic notation. You will learn it, and then you will perform it.
And you compose even a sort of four-part fugue for
in that
four
piece.
months. Yeah.
Yes, in that piece, there is a moment where I wanted to develop towards polyphony, which is our nature of Westerners. And I had a sort of imitation type of thing.
Double canon in contrary motion.
Yeah, I have that at one moment.
Yes, and you used also this kind of graphic notations for monks in your next piece, Anâhata.
Yeah.
And in this piece, you could realize, so to say, your dream to put in connection the gagaku instruments, Japanese traditional instruments, the voices of true monks, and the world of electroacoustic sounds.
Okay.
And you have in this piece this very fascinating symbiosis between the futuristic world of electroacoustics and the archaic world of the gagaku and the chanting of the monks.
Shômyô.
So
it is at this moment that there was a misunderstanding from the contemporary music milieu towards what I was doing, because they could not understand why I was picking this archaism of old music, to mix it with future. Electronic was still the future for people at this time. And this is how I developed progressively this idea that we are minorities in this world. All those treasures of traditional music are questioned by the modernization of society all over Asia, etc. And we are also here in Western countries a minority for doing contemporary music or electronic music, etc. So it was a sort of a united minority of the world united.
Yes.
I still believe it is like that, but since 20 years it has changed quite a lot. Most of the people who are working in jazz, for example, are very aware of non-Western music. They absorb all of that. Multicultural is a little bit much more introduced in our society these days than it was in the 80s.
I think you were a sort of exception in your generation with this great passion for non-Western music, because on one side you were, so to say, a classical composer, then a serialist composer, but on the other side you had always your secret garden with your passionate listenings of non-Western music. And can you please tell us a little bit about the beginning of your passion for non-Western music? How did it begin?
It came during my adolescence,
Yes.
My sister, who is elder than me, 8 years old, so she became a guide, international guide, and she was doing long stay abroad in Japan, in Egypt, etc. And every time she was coming back, she would bring me some record of traditional music from these countries, and I listened at home until the record was used. That's how I discovered gagaku music, no theater music, etc. And so it started when I was 15, 16, 17, and the more there was a great effort at this time, because these music were new, but there were some Westerners like the French writer and Indianist Alain Danielou, who became an important had an important position at the UNESCO. You know,
Yes.
he began to start this collection of UNESCO collection from the recording of Persian music, Iran music, you know, Indian music, etc., Japanese music, etc. So it was the first time in the Western that we could have an approach to non-Western music recognized as an important cultural part of the world. You know. Before, there was a certain lack of consideration for those music. And I remember in the 70s, I was doing with Jacques Brunet, who was a sort of ethnomusicologist, French ethnomusicologist, who was specialized in Indonesian music. He'd been living in Indonesia, he'd been married with an Indonesian girl, and he published 40 records of Indonesian music at this time in France. You know. He even took the initiative in Indonesia to reconfigure an old style of Indonesian music from the 19th century, which had been forgotten, more or less by the Indonesian musician. So he proposed them, with the French support, to recreate this type of music in order to make a recording of this. It was a sort of opera theater with singing, gamelan, etc. So with Jacques Brunet, we did regular broadcast at noon about non-Western music. At noon, it was the time of lunch in France, you know. Yes. And so we put some Kalsum music, Japanese music, no theater music, etc. All of that we loved, you know. But after several broadcasts, we started to receive letters of insult, you know. We are tired of all your Arabic music, you know, what is that, you know, what's that? So we could not continue the broadcast because the director of the Radio France said, you know, there are too many protests, you know. So it is strange to see what was the reaction. Now it would not exist anymore because people know they have been traveling more. People heard some other type of sound from all over the world, and they are not so repulsive about that, you know.
Indeed, your familiarity with non-Western music, especially with Asiatic traditions, influenced your identity, acoustical identity as composer, very strong.
Sure.
And if I think to Indian classical music, I see that also there the long durations of the performance are very essential. And therefore also in your music there is a very intimate connection between the quality of the sounds and the temporality. You were very often criticized because the very long durations of your pieces, until 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, without interruption, don't stop. But it's not a kind of arrogance, and to say you must listen to my music for 5 hours or something like that.
But it was interpreted like this.
But it is on the contrary a very intimate necessity of the content of the music itself.
Sure, I agree. But some organizers told me, you know, but who do you imagine you are? You know, you believe you are so important that you impose people to listen to your music for 4 hours. You are crazy, you know. So I heard that quite a lot of time. But I said, and I can say it again, that this long duration for work come also from my connection with cinema.
With cinema, yes. You wrote this text, Je suis un enfant du cinéma.
Yeah, je le pense de plus en plus. I believe that more and more. Because when I was young, I am born in a very modest family, and when we were living in our district in Paris, the most practical distraction we could have was to go every weekend to the next movie theater, you know, and see the movie of the week, you know. But every movie is a minimum 1 hour and a half or 2 hours or more sometimes. You know. So it's a whole evening. We go there to see one movie. Yes. We don't go there to see 6 movies. Yes. Theater is the same. Could you imagine having a play of theater of 5 minutes and another play of another author 10 minutes, etc., yes. like most of the concerts are organized. Yes. Yeah. So I feel the way that organizing a concert for me is to put yourself in a certain situation where you can appreciate a certain aesthetic inside which you have the time to enter, and so the work must be substantial enough and long enough so that you spend the whole evening with that work and that composer. Yeah,
yeah, but that's really very different from in comparison with many works of the so-called new music. Most composers of today, above all in the academic new music scene, realize small things, pieces of 10, 15 minutes, because in that way they are easy to program, to perform.
Publisher put them to do that, you know.
But actually, there are many other composers in our tradition who wrote very long pieces. I think also to Stockhausen. Yeah. Of course, it is a very rich model for you and inspired.
Yeah, Stockhausen, Mahler, and so on.
But yes, Mahler, Bruckner, they already composed very big form, very big voyages, so to say, yeah, sure. And not at least Richard Wagner. But I mean, if a composer as you today, nowadays, realizes so long works, in that way you are very inactual, because in our society nobody has time. Time is something that nobody has anymore, and therefore you propose really a totally different dimension of listening to sounds, to music for many hours. Yeah. And I think that in that way you almost push the people to change themselves, to change them also their approach to time and to life, to daily life.
You know, we spoke some years ago about this book by a young German philosopher concerning the acceleration of the time.
Yeah, Hartmut Rosa.
Yeah, exactly.
Sociologist.
He explained exactly the problem that you are mentioning now.
Acceleration, yes.
And I totally agree with him. But he also, at one moment, quoted the fact that a certain number of artists are trying to go in the counter direction, yes, so as to make a sort of historical counterpoint, yes, counter power, yes, to oblige people to be in a work for a long time, to have an impregnation, yes, of a long time, whether it's a music work or painting work, to see. You know, I was very impressed when I was many years ago in Taipei. They have this beautiful museum of traditional painting, Chinese, you know, and there is a full room where you have plenty of seats, very silent room, and you have one screen with a lot of good light, you know, and they expose one huge traditional painting, yes, Tang or Dynasty, you know, those very spiritual painting, you know, and people can sit there and look at this painting for whole day if they want, you know. Yes. And this is an approach of art which touched me very much. Yes. Yeah. And I believe, you know, I know I am inactual. I have been before more inactual than today, because the reaction of most of the young people, the recent concert I did with Gaku-no-Michi 4 years ago in Paris, in a suburb of Paris, we took a night program to do that, you know, during the night, and a lot of young people came, and they lie on floor and they listen full of Gaku-no-Michi, and they were very happy of that. They told me after that it was a really significant event for them, so I believe that maybe there will be more and more young people sensitive to this metamorphosis of trying to be counter the tendency of our epoch. The tendency of our epoch is multiplicity, dispersion, too much quantity of information, submersion, and a lot of people will feel the need to concentrate again on something and concentrate for a long time on one thing and avoid this type of how can I say dispersion. Dispersion, exactly. We are going into little pieces, etc.
Yes, but it's also another kind of conception of art. Art not as entertainment, as in the modern world, the most common people think, but art as a deep existential necessity.
Spiritual necessity.
The existential necessity. Let's think to the old Greeks. They went to the theater not at evening when they were a little bit tired after the work, but at morning with sunrise, with full psychical and body energy, in order to dedicate the whole day to the aesthetical experience of the tragedies, comedies, and so on. And in that sense, your music proposes really a change of life.
I hope so. But this is not only my wish, It comes naturally.
Yeah.
It's my nature to express myself in music that way. So this is not a program which I write down,
But in order to listen to your music, one has to have time. That is essential. So to say, I would like to use the words of Baudelaire. In order to listen to your music, one needs calme, luxe et volupté.
Maybe, but I spoke just recently with someone who was at the concert yesterday, and he said, this is the man who is there, he said that he found short yesterday concert.
Too short.
Not too short, but short. He said he was surprised that 2 hours had already passed.
That's typical with your music, with your sounds, yes.
So it means that there is a modification of our perception of time when entering into that type of context of music. And this is what I believe in amplification of spirituality. I believe, we have a certain spirituality, we have a certain brain now. We are in a certain level of the human spaces. But I believe in the future there will be metamorphosis. And I hope this metamorphosis will go to a much growing brain, and much growing spirituality.
But do you identify spirituality with brain?
Yeah. I think it's the same. The capacity of being conscious of oneself, which makes the difference between us and pure animals, is belonging to the spirituality, is belong to our brain, our capacity of thinking, reflecting, comparing, taking deduction, etc. And I believe this has to extend itself in the future evolution of the race.
Well, but for example, the title of your work, Anâhata. Anâhata means not only the primordial sound, but it's also the name of the chakra of the heart in the Indian tradition. But why do you identify?
No, I did not identify with this chakra. No. I identify with the original sound of the universe, which the yogi try to hear. It's so this is the Indian interpretation of their own.
The Indian interpretation is that this primordial sound, so to say, is in the heart of the man. But I don't want to be conformed with the Indian interpretation. You know. For me, Anâhata is this primordial vibration, which is perhaps, there are many scientific research. I remember years ago I read many articles on that. They needed to find the vibration of the first, just after the Big Bang, when the light opened itself, And it was discovered in the 60s, just by random, by some engineer who were trying to have huge communication, huge speakers to hear. And then it was detected later by satellites who were made especially to get the original vibration of the universe. And we have now a cartography which is made of that original vibration, where you can see some moment where there is a little bit of concentration of matter, which gave later all these grapes of galaxies and all of that, So scientific, we can search about those first vibrations of the universe, and recently they discovered some others. What is the name? You mean the gravitational
wave? Yeah, exactly.
That you can,
yes. Which had been predicted by Einstein since more than 1 century, and it took 1 century to be able to have the tools to verify it.
You say, my faith as a composer is the sounds. I believe in the sounds. But what actually did you learn from the sounds, from your own listening experiences?
It would be impossible to make a catalogue of what I learned. I learn every day. When I listen to sound, I learn every day. When I discover sound, when I work at composition, it's limitless, I could not explain what I discovered,
But do you make difference between the sounds and the sound?
What do you mean?
The sound is singular with the big S and the sounds.
I mix them all together.
I mean the sound in an abstract, almost metaphysical sense, and the sounds of
the sounds I perceive it with my body, my ear. It's something. It's not abstract for me. A sound, just something sensitive. There's no abstract scheme about sound.
But what does it mean for you, listening?
Listening, just listening.
What is particular in this activity of humankind to listen to sounds? Why is it so essential for you? Because you are a musician. You dedicate all your life to make music.
You concentrate on what is possible to listen as much as you concentrate on what's possible to see. It's our sense, our main sense, are the ear and the eyes. So we concentrate on those senses and we try to develop them at their maximum. We could have other sense. We could have the odor far much more developed, like the dogs, and we could cultivate an art of odor, Stockhausen is trying to develop all of that as parameters,
Yes.
And I totally agree with him. It is the extension of man in the future.
Yeah. But you concentrated in your life on sounds.
Because I am a composer and because my life has been concentrating on sound. That's natural.
But just by chance, or because you believe that concentration on
No.
sounds is something more, so to say,
No,
than
you know,
on other sensual levels.
my gift for music came like in many families when I was very young, you know. And I told you yesterday in our conversation that my father was a sort of singer amateur, you know, who had so many difficulties in life that he could not make a career of singer, but he had some gift. And so when he discovered that I had a little bit of gift, just listening to TSF, you know, radio or things like that, you know, he just supported that gift, you know, asked friends around, do you think he could make a musician? Yeah, I said, okay, yes. So then you know, in music you start at 9. I started piano at 9, you know. And then when I was 12, I quit the normal school and I went to the conservatory. And so when you are taken in that way, then of course when you are 20, you are a musician and you concentrate on music, you know.
But you believe in the power of sound. I remember a very old text of yours on Shânti, in a almost utopian way.
Sure.
You said, yeah, with my sounds I want to change the world, because with sounds I act on the world. I have an influence on minds of people, on the reality.
I agree.
But do you still
I still believe, yes. I still believe.
That means that you believe in a sort of particular power of the sound.
Yeah, but
you can do something.
If I was a painter, I would believe in the particular capacity of transforming the human being by looking at a certain number of things. You know?
Yes. And do you think that through your practice of composition, of working in studios, were you changed by your music? Because you often speak about your past as a composer, also as a cheminement, quoting this famous book of, how is the name of this?
Masui.
Masui. Because I think that in your case, art and life are very close together.
Yeah, but you know, I wrote those texts at the time of Shânti in the 70s.
Yes.
As an answer to the music milieu, you know. The music milieu I had been grown with, you know, was this post-Boulez milieu, which did not accept such type of view on music, you know. Could not accept the idea that we can try to transform the world by listening in deep to something, to some work, etc. How can I say? It was a sort of, not a provocation, but to say to them there is another way of doing music than what you are doing, commission 10 minutes, orchestra, score, etc. The job which they are doing, you know.
Bureaucratic activity.
Bureaucratic activity, yes, because they call themselves avant-garde, but avant-garde is bureaucracy. So for me it has no meaning at all. Yeah.
But now about the difference of the quality of listening experience with electroacoustical music and with traditional vocal and instrumental music. I think that for you it's clear that there is a very specific quality of electroacoustic music. What is this difference for you, the main difference between listening to instrumental vocal music and listening to electroacoustic music? Do you have another kind of experience?
You know, it comes from the energy. You know, sound in traditional music, acoustic music, instrument music is always produced by the energy of the body.
Breath.
Muscles, pressure, breath. So it's always limited by our body capacity.
Human energy.
You're breathing, you need to breathe, you need to stop.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
You are pushing, you know, in a piece this fantastic piece by Stockhausen where they perform a long tone, all the strings, you know. Trance, yes, exactly. You can imagine the musician holding it. It sounds so long. There is always this limit of the body. When you enter in electronic, the energy source is the electricity.
Yes.
And this energy is without end. It's never need to breathe, never need to stop.
And you play as long as you want, as loud as you want, as dense as you want. Yeah.
It's been criticized by most of the public music milieu that this is the robinet à son. With, you open the water, and you let the sound go. But I believe electronic composers who understand this type of energy are the only. No, but Stockhausen or other people, they believe on this energy and they play the game with that energy.
Yeah, because you love such big sound masses, sound walls.
Perhaps I have a certain aesthetic predilection for that, of course. But nevertheless, this is why some young composers belonging to the noise movement are very much supporting my music these days, because in that noise movement they understood to catch the energy of the electricity, and they don't play the game of many people who want to have a new interface. Sorry. When people want to invent new interface where the fingers are entering, where the energy of pushing button is entering, I think it is not a proper research to go on that way. To go on the electronic way is to have a resolute behavior with the energy, the electricity energy, and to play the game with that electricity energy. Not to try to reproduce the acoustic energy of the past.
And once François Bale said that in the history of mankind there are two main discoveries: the fire and then electricity.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
And these two discoveries cause, so to say, a switch on in human consciousness. And then, the fire with the presence of Prometheus.
Sure.
And then later the electricity. And the discovery of electricity nowadays influence also our music, our way of thinking about music. But I think that in your cases, you use really this potentiality of electric energy also in order to lead listeners in a sort of very excessive experiences, because many of your works are, so to say, a sort of extreme, excessive experiences.
Extreme in relation with what we have the habit to listen.
Yeah, of course. And in this sense, there is a sort of secret connection between your electroacoustic music and romantic tradition. Also, not only what concerns the long durations, but also the kind of expressivity, of course, within a total other musical language. But this very acute expressivity is not so common in electroacoustic music.
Yeah, I agree. The more the time passes, the more I want my electroacoustic music to be emotional.
Yes.
And a work like the work I did yesterday evening is, I believe, emotional. And I felt that a lot of people felt it that way, And I am very happy of what they felt. Because I criticize all those academic formalistic composers who consider the computer music as an abstraction, a tool with which you make combination, etc. And in which they do not involve themselves, they do not involve the life, they do not involve what's happening in the world. I find this type of art completely cut of all the reality of our body, of our perception, of our information, of everything, you know. That's why it grows only on some small area and it cannot touch the mass of people. I am sure that if we had not those prejudgments against serious music, you know, avant-garde music coming from the classical music, etc., I am sure that my music is capable to touch large mass of people.
Yeah. I am convinced about
it. It is only the social censorship which is working now, which stop us to contact large mass of people. And so we have a terrible lack of courageous organizers in our society. You know. Because, you know, everything is taken by the popular music, the vulgar music, which is commercial music, before all, you know, systematically, you know. And it's made by money, by commerce, by business, etc. And it's terrible because when I see, for example, recently we had the disappearance of several important people, Boulez, and Jacques Rivette, the filmmaker, you know. Well, Boulez had certain homage on Arte, you know, which is a specific channel of culture, you know. Jacques Rivette, just some little mention at one moment. But then you had Prince, you know, disappearing. Well, I like Prince, I have nothing against him. But, you know, he is a typical commercial type of musician, certainly gifted, certainly having invention in his own field, you know, but guided by the roads of the commercial music. You know, you must do some new pieces in order to sell millions of records. You know, so it's a whole industry, it's a whole business. You know? So if we were not completely crushed by those type of social system, if we had a social system of true evaluation of things, we will not be in this isolation situation. Because I know that this electronic music, the way I practice it, the way I do it, are capable to touch lots of people, mass of people. Like at the time of Mahler, he was capable to touch lots of people.
Dear Claude Eloy, some years ago you founded a publishing house and a label with the name Hors Territoire. So to say, programmatically, you show that you are an outsider in the music scene of today. I would like that you comment a little bit the name of your own label with which you publish books and CDs, compact discs, in order to documentate your work since the beginnings. And what do you mean exactly with this expression, hors territoire?
No, it's because some years ago, when I was young, I got publishers. My music was published, performed. I got a certain relationship with the establishment of the modern music. You know. But progressively, the more I developed my personal approach of music, the more it became difficult to get publishers. Furthermore, publishers, they love to publish papers. When you deal with electroacoustic music, they say, oh, well, that's not our job, you know. So some publishers, Universal Edition, tried to sign contract with the VDR, etc. But they don't master the idea of having electronic music. You know. They master the score, the writing, music writing, that they know how to do. So for the publication of electroacoustic music, only some avant-garde label did try at the time of the LP, you know, in the 70s, did try to publish some electroacoustic music. But with my work, which are so long, Gaku-no-Michi, they published a 2 LP album, so I was obliged to select only some parts, you know. It was the same with Anâhata, same with Shânti. And then, well, they were expecting we would sell millions of exemplars, and they did not sell millions of exemplars, they sold just the limited quantity of avant-garde music, you know. So it was not a fortune for them. So they progressively let it go away. So finally, during the year 2000, I discovered myself without any publishing support, without any work published, and I suffered from that because there was no possibility of communication of my music to anyone. And I knew I had in several radios good recordings which were made. And it is the young people, those young noise movement people, you know, who told to me, you know, the only way to get out of that is to publish yourself your own record. You know. And so,
in a similar way at Stockhausen.
Yeah, and Stockhausen gave me the example, you know, and I spoke with him in the 19th already. He explained to me that at the beginning he had a contract with Deutsche Grammophon, you know. He explained to me the scene where a young guy from Deutsche Grammophon came with ties, you know, and attaché case, you know, and I said, you know, Mr. Stockhausen, you don't sell enough records, you know. So, but Stockhausen said to them, but can you keep those records on the catalogue? No, we are going to suppress because we put all those LP material on the scratching machine, you know, because we want to use the material for publishing all those records. Wow, you know, it's scandalous, all of that. Yeah. So anyway, I understood that if I did not put some money from my pocket, my music wouldn't be never published, and it would die in archive of radio, etc. Yeah.
And so you did a great work, a big work.
So I decided myself, I created a small association with my sister, you know,
yes,
just in order to give a minimum of commercial structure, you know. And I put from my pocket what is necessary to publish. Of course, I published 1,000 exemplars, not more,
yes,
you know.
Yes.
Yeah. For the record, I've been successful because I began to publish Gaku-no-Michi integral version, you know, and I could find a fabric which could offer to me a book which you can open where you have the 4 records, one after the other. Digipack, 4 records is quite rare, you know. So that was my first publication, and since that work began to be a little bit known in the underground place, you know, Gaku-no-Michi, that was the only work which was associated with myself, more or less, you know. So the distributor, who is himself a noise artist, Jérôme Neutinger, who created this internet distribution, Metamkin, you know, which is quite well known now since 25 years. Yeah. Immediately he phoned me, you know, I heard that you are producing your own records, I am totally interested to distribute them, etc. So I said immediately, okay, you know. So it works like how does it, c'est un dépôt-vente. You sell, you put records in their place, you know, and they sell a little bit of record, and then every 3 months they send the results.
Yeah. But why hors territoire?
Hors territoire. You know, I had been.
Why did you feel hors territoire?
Before I tried, because I was embarrassed because that social situation since many years. I remember in the 19th, when I did the Warsaw Festival, I wanted to make information about those events, because there is no way, you get a good invitation in a good festival, like Warsaw Autumn. So they will inform in the Warsaw festival. But in France, all over, they won't be informed, So I began, because there was the beginning of internet at this moment, I began to publish some little information called hors frontière, outside border. And so I developed with this idea that there must be some communication outside of normal borders. And so when I decided to create my label, it became hors territoire, naturally, quite naturally that way.
Yeah, but naturally you are, of course, you are an emblematic case of composer hors territoire. But nowadays there are many composers, so to say, that are not accepted in academic scenes, and they are hors territoire. But as you said some minutes ago, nowadays the role of composer in society has no value.
No, unfortunately.
And but I think that art was always more or less useless.
No, but
see to the poetry. A poet is always useless, but extremely necessary. Yeah, and I think that you have a very strong poetical feeling with your works, with your music, and in that sense, your music is totally useless, like most of Greek art, but it's at the same time extremely necessary for our society. As you said some minutes ago, you do, so to say, a counter movement with your long durations, deep concentrations in sounds, and so on.
No, but you have to convince society about the truth of your work. That's the whole problem. Speaking between us, we all understand each other. We all think the same way. We all feel the same way, But we belong to a small community. The whole problem is to impose to the much broader community to understand our point of view, and that is where the difficulty starts. Because our society is materialistic society. Or you say the poet is the symbol of the poorness. When you say someone he's a poet, so people think, he has no money, he cannot eat, Painter have a certain market, When painters have the chance to get Centre Pompidou exhibit, they are sold by galleries, they are sold by how do you say? Sotheby, this type of thing, and they rise the price. Some painter today, for me, has not much talent, like Jeff Koons, but they produce a little, Bambi type of thing, They sell it for millions of dollars, That in music never happened. A score of music, the best you can hope is to have a collector, who when I was student of Boulez, he came once driving a small car, and he was proud because it was his first car in his life, and he said, well, this is the result of the manuscript of the Marteau sans maître, but if I write to this foundation, they won't be interested. They won't be interested. I have the manuscript, huge paper, huge transparent paper made with what we call Indian ink. In English we say Chinese ink or something like that. Yeah. I have this manuscript of the À l'approche du feu méditant, and no one is interested to buy it. So finally I shall give it to the BNF, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, so that they can protect it at least. So unfortunately, there is now these days, sorry, there is now these days no market for the composition of music, serious composition of music.
And how do you see the future of music?
Oh, very, very negatively. I'm afraid we are entering into an area where professionalists will have much difficulty to be recognized. We enter into a new historical period where the facilities of making music are multiplied, technologically. Electronic music now is everyone. Yeah. Particularly when I was in China last year, I see all those young Chinese who are always with the computer software make music. Sound art, they call it sound art under the American influence. They are not looking for truly work of art. They are looking for playing with sound, entertaining with sound, having an action with sound, etc.
Some people nowadays also believe that the future of music is only the electroacoustical music. But I don't think so. But you also wrote a text against the orchestral music. You say that orchestra is now belongs to the past and that there is not at all future.
I believe that the orchestra history is quasi finished. The orchestra was a creation of the Western world. It's developed with the tonal system. Of course, I recognize the success of modernity with the orchestra. I recognize the success of Stravinsky, of Messiaen, even Boulez and Stockhausen were, for me, the last great master of orchestra music in the modern times. But I am afraid after them, I think orchestra is tied with the history of tonal music. And now that tonal music is dead, I don't imagine any interesting development of the orchestra through atonal and all consequence of atonal music. I don't believe. So I'm quite sure that economically, electronic is going to win the game all over. We have seen in the recent years orchestra diminishing, government imposing fusion between different orchestras so as to diminish the cost. It happened here with the Südwestfunk and with the Baden-Baden Südwestfunk Orchestra, with the Freiburg Orchestra,
Yeah,
and there was protest, but those protests cannot go on for centuries, And the same with France, recently they wanted to suppress the Philharmonie Orchestra, keep only the National Orchestra, etc. It's all over. Orchestra are costing too much, and electronic costs nothing. So I am sure in the long range, electronic is going to win.
But do you mean that only orchestra music has no future, or in general instrumental music? Do you think that instrumental music is going to disappear?
Well, for me, the flourishing of instrumental music is the orchestra, the symphonic orchestra. Chamber music for me is not so important. It started this chamber ensemble of modern music, which we have the habit now. It began with Schoenberg, and Schoenberg was confronted with an economic problem. Symphonic orchestra did not want to perform his music, it was not correctly rehearsed, so he wanted to have an ensemble with which he can rehearse much longer, so he created this chamber ensemble. And so Boulez continued with the domaine musical, and it became à la mode in the 60s to have those chamber ensemble of modern music all over the world. Now there are very few of those ensembles which are created.
But don't you regret this disappearing of instrumental music?
No. I have always considered that a concert is not a show. Only when there is a conductor, a great conductor, with the repertory which value the conductor, which is the romantic repertory, then I accept that there is a sort of show, that's why I like Mahler conducted by some great conductor. This is okay for me. There is a sort of harmony between what we see, what we hear, and the presence of the public, etc. But these are exceptional cases. Generally, I hate to see a conductor in modern music coming in front of 10 musicians. I find that absolutely useless.
Yeah. But apart of the conductor, I mean, don't you regret to experience in concert musicians playing instruments, also without a conductor?
But we are seated there and we do nothing. So we look at what?
Well, but also
I agree. I like very much Liszt, the opera by Stockhausen,
yes,
because he conceived a sort of choreography,
yes,
sort of he tried to amplify this attitude of the show from the instrumentalist. So in that case, it's going further, But generally, when I see modern music which are performed with people seated in their score, there are many pleasantries made by modern music score. Modern music score are sometimes unbelievable. You need several music stands to put the score, and it's a miracle if it doesn't fall down.
I'm very sad about that, what you said for the orchestras and the music in future. I think the teachers of music, they have die Aufgabe. They have to do that the young children learn this tradition, to go into the concerts, to learn to like a symphony of Beethoven.
Yeah, but I agree on the future of the orchestra as a museum, but only as a museum, because I think it's improper for modern creativity. I have experienced it so many times, refusal from orchestra of new score composed for them. The mentality of orchestra musicians is absolutely awful, particularly in France. Or Germany is much better. But in France, I had so many conflicts in France, in Belgium, so many conflicts with orchestra that one cannot consider it is a tool open for creativity. And the proof is that the orchestra is not evolving anymore. The last evolution was Stockhausen Gruppen with 3 orchestras in 1958, it's so far. The last instrumental evolution was Boulet's 3rd improvisation in Plis Lompli with the cello in quarter tones and the 2 harps in quarter tones. And the percussions, a little bit of the percussions. But since then, there is no major evolution from the orchestra. Or along the history of orchestral literature, we see from each composer an evolution of the instrumentation and ornamentation. Wagner was asking for specific tuba to be built for his own opera. Berlioz was asking Adolphe Sax to create some instruments. At this time, there was a relationship between builder of instruments and composers. Chopin, Liszt were very tied with Pleyel, as a factor of piano. These days, the only relationship we have is with the electronic music with software companies, which are by thousands now, all over the world. And there is no relationship between a composer and a factor of traditional instrument. Nothing. So this is showing to me that the historical factors are diminishing to towards the orchestra. So we keep the orchestra as a museum, I agree. Make the people, as you said, young people coming to appreciate the classical music, to appreciate the romantic music. So keep the symphonic orchestra for the whole repertoire in philharmonie, because governments love to have, governments nowadays days are building philharmonie like in the past they were building church, the same. Chinese wants to be recognized by our society, they build philharmonies, stadium and philharmonies. They don't build church anymore. But I don't see any future in creativity through the symphonic orchestra. As a museum, symphonic orchestra is very okay. But that's why they will diminish in quantity, and the best orchestra will remain. Berlin Philharmonie or Paris Philharmonie maybe will remain.
But it's just a social problem. It's just a social problem.
No, it's a historical problem. It's a historical problem. It's a history of music problem. There was, at the time of the development of the symphony orchestra, there was a certain class of people who had the possibilities to show their interest, to push their interest. That was the case in romantic music, And now those factors, bourgeoisie is destroyed all over, you have a middle class all over, and this middle class appreciate only Prince and Johnny Hallyday,
Yeah. That's also a very big problem of our days. You regret very often that we don't have today an cultural elite which support artists.
Yeah.
And during your youth, it was a little bit different.
Yeah, I have been in Paris during my youth. I have been seeing the last mécène of modern music, who was Mrs. Suzanne Tesnas, the founder of the Domaine Musical for Pierre Boulez. That was the last. When there was this huge crisis about the succession of Pierre Boulez to lead the Domaine Musical, it was also the state who wanted to subvention the Domaine Musical. And Boulez wanted to keep the independence of the Domaine Musical because he was thinking the inverse of what he thought later. That if the state give a subvention, they will influence the program. So he refused that. So he let the Domaine Musical go away, and his successor was Gilbert Ami, who made the agreement with the state to receive the regular subvention. But when he came back at the end of the 70s to create the Ensemble Intercontemporain, he wrote before to Gilbert Ami, you have to annulate the Domaine Musical because I don't want to compete with the remnants of the Domaine Musical. Now we create the Ensemble Intercontemporain, I don't want any competition. So Gilbert Ami had to suppress the Domaine Musical, and he got a position at the French radio, became conductor of the Philharmonic radio. But this elite, I regret that it doesn't exist anymore, because we are now in the conflict of, I can tell you, my doctor these days, I consult him, and I said, I have a concert to do in Cologne, so you must get me rid of that bronchite, But in his mind, he believes I am a DJ. He has no idea of the type of music I do. I see in his eyes, he believes, oh yes, he has a hair like that, he must be a DJ, This is typically the cliche we have. When I say I do electronic music, everyone believes I am a DJ. I am going in the bar at night, to make dance to people. Because now we have, you take the program, the Pariscope program in Paris, it's written electronic concert. Electronic concert is only DJ concert. There is no one serious electronic concert at all.
The work we listened to yesterday, Midnight of Fate, is part of a big cycle that you began in the 80s, at the end of the 80s.
Not so big.
Well, but...
I had the ambition that it would be big, but there was so many contradiction and difficulty to realize it, that it was not so big as I ambition at
Yes,
at
it's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Still a work in progress.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, the title of this cycle was Libération.
No.
But few years ago, you renamed
No.
this cycle Chante pour l'autre moitié du ciel. This is a sentence of Mao Zedong, songs for the other half of the sky.
And I think Mao Zedong certainly borrowed this expression to some old Chinese philosopher, you know, but for
yes.
Chinese symbolism, the other side of the sky is the feminine
Yes.
power.
So to say this cycle is dedicated to the eternal feminine, to the woman.
No, women who had spirituality, influence in spirituality, so either in philosophy or poetry, or it depends, you know. For me, spirituality is not obliged to be a religion.
Of course. And you began with your work Butsumiyoe.
Yeah.
Yeah, very shortly, some words about all these works that you composed. So just some few words.
You know, it's the product of circumstance, you know.
Yes.
We have some project, you know, in the abstract.
Yes.
But then we have to adapt to some realities, life, configuration, etc. So,
but first, why did you decide to dedicate this cycle to the woman?
At this moment, I was interested in feminism, you know, and I did a trip in America in the 90s, a little bit before, and I was interested to watch American literature about feminism, and I discovered that they had also ecofeminism, you know, and I discovered that these feminists valued the cult of the goddess. You know?
The goddess.
Yeah. In the ancient time, you know, it seems that the goddess was predominant before the male god took power and so on. So I was very interested in that. And so I got a suggestion from the Festival d'Automne. Festival d'Automne in Paris, the director, the founder was a very good minister. His name was Michel Guy. He was the creator of this festival and was very open-minded. He knew the artist. He had a good relationship. He was a mécène, you know, in the best sense, you know. And he wanted to make a series of commissions for his festival because of the celebration of the bicentennial of the French Revolution. So it was 1989, 2 centuries after 1709, you know. So I asked him, but what do you want me to do? Do you want me to write a composition on the Declaration of the Right of Man, you know, or something like that? He said, no, don't worry, just do the work you need to do. And for me, the French Revolution is the revolution of freedom. And so you are free to do whatever you like. Okay. Then I searched, you know, what type of configuration. There was this Japanese singer who was living in Paris, Minara, you know, excellent singer, who was in Paris since at least 10 years, and who frequently asked me, why don't you compose something for me, you know? And I said, you know, well, time will come later. I proposed several projects which were not so enthusiastically received, you know. And at this time, so finally, I found a text, a Japanese text, which I had found before during a trip in Japan. I had it in English, and it's the history. It's a novel from Hihara Saikaku, a classical writer of Japan, who was not very officially recognized because he had the habit of writing about people who have certain freedom, prostitutions, etc., you know. And so he wrote a very interesting text where a woman who has been pushed towards prostitution by some social pressure, I don't know, it doesn't matter. who had this life of descending all the scale of prostitution. And at the end of her life, she comes to a temple where there are 500 Buddhas represented. It does exist, you know, it does exist in Japan. 500 Buddhas represented, and everyone looking at those Buddhas perhaps can recognize someone he's been known in life. And this woman comes to this temple and she looks at all the Buddha and she recognizes all the lovers she had in all her life, you know. 10,000 lovers and 10,000 Buddha.
But she kept her purity.
But it's a very sensitive world, you know, because Mizoguchi, the great cineast, has been doing a scene from that book in one of his films. But the scene is very impressive, very sensitive, and I said to Yumi, why don't you like I compose a piece like that? And she got enthusiastic because she said to me, I am born from Osaka, and this is written in the original Japanese language from Osaka. I can speak it, I understand it, and it's really from my areas. So I decided, okay, I compose for you that piece.
But I would like to know something about the original title of this cycle dedicated to the woman, Liberation.
Yeah, it's because, so I had a sort of basic idea, you know, it was for the second anniversary of the French Revolution. Michel Guy told me, you are free, so I wanted the freedom of women, you know, so I call it Liberation, you know, just simply that. After that, I found this title a little bit primitive, a little bit simple, and I wanted to have it a little bit more sophisticated. This is why I wrote songs for the other half of the sky, which in my idea seems is quite the same, means the same, but is better put in words.
Yeah, but you had this diagram with different meanings of liberations that you meant.
But I maintain it. Yeah.
But you often spoke also about Alain Danielou in your texts, about also the tantric traditions about which Danielou wrote, and also in the tantric tradition from ancient India, the feminine power has an important role. I would like to know something more about the influence of Danielou and this cultural milieu in your formation, cultural formation.
Danielou, I never met him so personally.
You never met him?
Once accidentally, because he created a center called CEMO, C-E-M-O, Centre d'études des musiques orientales. Sorry. And I became a student when I was 19. There was several teachers, among them there was a woman who was a specialist of Iranian music, Nelly Caron, and she was also an ondiste, on marteau player, and I was myself an on marteau player. I was a student. I was a student of Maurice Marteneau himself. An excellent man who was very much also attentive to Orientalism, philosophy.
Gave you a present this book on
Zen. Gave me this written by a German guy called Heriger. Yes. The Zen in the art of the archery. Yes. Very good book. Very good book.
I know it.
You know the book.
I read it. Yes.
Yeah, excellent book.
Yes.
So Maurice Marteneau gave me that book. So it was part of his teaching. On Marteneau was not just a technique. He wanted also to teach his own Marteneau with spirituality. Give to the student information about other type of music, other type of philosophy, etc. So Maurice Marteneau was really a good, interesting teacher. So then I talk a little bit with Nelly Caron about Persian music, and I took a little bit of classes of her at the Centre d'études des musiques orientales. So that was my...
The first approach with Alain Danielou, the ethnomusicological work.
Yeah, but I read his book, because he was publishing, he was at the UNESCO, important place, and he was helping publishing books, publishing records. So his influence was immense. He helped discover Ravi Shankar, all the great Indian musicians of this time. There was concert of the Daga brothers, organized by Danielou at the UNESCO in Paris.
But then you began also to read his books on Indian mythology, Indian philosophy, and because sometimes in your books I can see a sort of influence of Danielou also in your polemics with monotheism, for example. Because Danielou made a lot of polemics with monotheistic religions, and you do the same sometimes in your texts.
Maybe it's the influence of my sister, because my sister was very much also attached to those books by Danielou. Well, I don't give such an importance to those polemics against monotheism, but it is true that when I look at this permanent war in the Middle East between Jewish, Catholic and Islam, both the three are monotheism and they still fight. And I think it is the source of a lot of conflict in the Western world. And if I look in Asia, I don't find any source of such type of conflict. So I give a certain superiority to polytheism, because polytheism seems to have a capacity of adaptation to social, spiritual situations, which are certainly more practical and more active than our terrible permanent fight since centuries about the three monotheists who come from the same place and are incapable to harmonize their position once forever. This is the only reason I have.
Well, and after Shômyô, you compose another piece of the cycle, Sappho Igetis, using poetry of the ancient Greek.
Yeah, because when I decided to compose this piece for Yuminara, I said I would like to have a vocal duetto. Yeah? And if you know someone who has the same facility of transforming the vocal timbre, so she said to me, yes, I have a young student who came from Spain, and she got a grant to come to study with me. I shall introduce you to her. And they were very young both together at this time, and that was Fatima Miranda, a very interesting Spanish improviser who got fabulous techniques, glottal techniques, all kinds of things. So I was obliged to compose for her, to go to Madrid for 8 days, to work every day with her, to examine her voice, trying to notate something. And she later said to me it was useful for me because my technique was more or less impulsive, but I never tried to put some order in my technique in my mind. So you helped me systematize and take note of how I produce the technique, etc. So we worked very actively together, and I said to her, when I come to try to study your voice, it's a little bit like when I come to a new electronic studio, and there are 8 days where I study the machine, what are the possibilities, etc. So I composed this piece for Fatima Miranda, and I took some extract of poetry of Sappho, because I like those poetry very much.
And you used her voice in combination also with electroacoustic sounds.
Yeah, later, yes.
Later.
Yes.
But in this case, you enjoyed the work with living musicians.
Yeah.
So to say that if you think that orchestra music has no future, But on the other side, the work with individuals
Soloists, yes.
is still possible.
No, soloists are more
With
interesting.
soloists.
Yeah, soloists. But it started with the fact of working with Michael Ranta.
Yes, with Yo-In.
Yo-In, yes.
Of the
Yo-In.
80s, this big piece for electroacoustic sounds and a percussionist with hundreds,
200
instruments.
Yo-In began when I was working at Gaku-no-Michi in Japan. When I finished, there was in Paris at the Festival d'Automne an organization of several concerts to Toru Takemitsu. And I went to those concerts, and I remarked that among his group there were many good percussionists, Japanese percussionists. And Japanese percussionists have this, Asian percussionists generally, not only Japanese, they have this superiority to the Western percussionists. Western percussionists, we call them in French, we don't say percussionists, only a recent word. We said in the past batter. Batter, bom, bom, bom.
Beats.
Yeah. So it means that in percussion in the Western country, it was the rhythms, the beat, which was very much important. While the percussionists in Asia, they have the habit, in Japan, for example, from kabuki theater, from no theater, they have the habit to choose the color of instrument, the tongue of instrument, very carefully. You know? And so they have a capacity of hearing the quality of a sound, of a percussion sound, very specific and much superior to most of the Western percussionists. Yeah. So I decided to compose a piece for one of those percussionists, and in Japan, the NHK radios said, it's interesting, your project, we can sample this percussionist, she will come with all her instruments, and we will do several days of recording and sampling, so we can go back home with those sampling. So we did that job. So originally, it was supposed to be for this Japanese percussionist. But then the Japanese, I had been using the studio for Gaku-no-Michi so long that they told me the electronic studio, we have other composers to care. You know. So I had to search electronic studio, and I found an electronic studio in Holland, in Utrecht. You know. People in Utrecht told me, no problem, you can come. We will transfer the courses in other stay, and you will have the analog studio for yourself all the time. They were very helpful, very kind. So I came to Utrecht, I worked very hard, you know, days and night. And finally, I got with all the electronic tapes of Yo-In. But then I had to realize a sort of score or what are the intervention of the living percussionist. And they said, we would like to organize a concert. They began to write to the Japanese percussionist, but they understood after a few letters that the cost of transporting all these instruments from Japan would be too much. So they said to me, you have to find a percussionist in Europe. You know. So I knew Michael Ranta, I met him in Japan before, and I knew that he was developing here in Cologne a company, you know, to import and export Asian instruments. So I went to him, and we had a very profound understanding because he's himself a composer, knows electronic, yes. He has a large culture of modern music, you know. And so we could agree, and furthermore, he has developed here in Cologne this Asian product sound, you know, which has quantities of super Asiatic gongs, yes. Asiatic bells, you know. So I could choose among all of that the most wonderful type of setting of instruments from Asian sound, you know. And that collaboration was very fundamental because I came here, I worked with him, and I never wrote a pure score, you know. I gave him some action to do. I set up For that scene, I want that instrument, that instrument, that instrument. For that other scene, another instrument. And you intervene by doing this, doing that. And so we exchange orally.
The whole work is based on oral tradition.
Total oral exchange, working together, rehearsing together, etc.
And that is also the case of later works of yours, like Ercus.
Like, of course, yes.
Yeah. Well, this, and with you you started then this attempt to combine the electroacoustic works with the solists. And it is also very essential in the cycle, the songs for the other half of the sky.
Sort of, yes.
Because in almost in all works of this cycle, you have also a solist or two solists, as in the case of Shômyô and Sappho Iketis. But I can understand from what you say that you believe that the future of music is based on individualistic choices, because the electroacoustic composers works alone at home now with these computers, and you say that orchestra music has no future, but perhaps just works with very talented solists that who are individualists. That is, that you don't believe in the future of music as something collective.
Well, there are no main signs in the present evolution of music going in that direction. Collective organization seems to belong to the past. Seems to belong to the moment of harmony with the tonal system, which gave the ground to develop huge chorus, huge collectivity of instruments, etc. But let's say that in the modern world, the evolution of jazz people, for example, has been creating a lot of individual people who want to improvise by themselves, to invent a technique on their own instrument. And that is multiplied these days more and more. Most of the friends, young friends I have now, who practice electroacoustic music with their computer, etc., work also with those soloists, creative soloists, etc. Sometimes they are themselves creative soloists. The case of Kasper Toplitz, my good friend, he is himself a bass player, and he plugs his bass on the computer, and out of his bass he gets noisy sound, crazy sound, But he performs his bass and he performs electronic music at the same time.
I would like to come back just a moment to your ears. Often, you said often that during the production of your you work very hard, in a very concentrated way. You said also once you worked for 24 hours without interruption. And often you said that you worked in a very concentrated way for months. And you, during this production, during the work, you reached some particular states of mind, a very mental exaltation, so to say. And from that time, the people began to call you, a little bit joking, the monk of the sound. For this total dedication to the work, to the sound. But can you say something about this particular state that you experienced during listening to sounds for many hours, for weeks and so on?
It's no problem. It comes from the... I had... that was in 1979.
Yes, 79.
So I was, 41?
41, you were 41.
Yeah. So I can tell you, when you are in your 40s, it's the best period of life in point of view of force, of energy, of capacity of concentration on things. I had this huge capacity, this energy, resisting to tiring, So I gave, since I had the chance to get this Utrecht studio, the people in Utrecht, they teach, they are university, So they had to move all their equipment to the first stage, so that to give to me a full access to the analog studio with plenty of tape recorder, you know, and full day, you know. So they had to change their organization, the structure, in order to help me, you know. So they were very nice people. They wanted to help me really. Do not hesitate to transform their own academic organization to help me doing my music, you know. So I am very much, I have a debt to them, you know. So when you get this studio, I remember the first day. It was funny because when you work in a studio which you don't know, you know, you search the whole day. You have the idea on morning. You want to make a circuit, you know, but it's not so easy, you know. When you have to plug, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you have a cable who is wrong, etc. So when you are your own technician, because there was no technician in this studio, you had to work everything yourself. You know? So it takes a lot of time to mistake and not to get the work. So I was working the whole day, and when I was reaching about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I was getting the first sound of the day. And at this time, one of the professors would knock at the door. Mr. Eloy, we are closing. It's time to close. So I became so furious. So I said, the hell, you know, I am a composer of music, I never close. So I went to the director, a very nice man, you know, and I said to him, you know, I come here in Utrecht at my own expense. I am very happy you gave me the studio, but I want to have the key of the studio at 5 o'clock. I am not closing. If you want to finish your day, it's up to you. But leave me here and give me a key so that I can go. So finally they made a meeting and they said, okay, we give you a key. So I had the studio with my own key, days and nights, and Saturdays and Sundays, etc. So I used that facility to work intensively to produce the whole series of tapes of Yoin. There was a technician. If I had some machine not working really, I could call the technician. Was a very nice man, competent, who would call specially to help me. You know. But generally, I had to do all the technique by myself. You know. So that helped me to work intensively, to give a lot of energy. And it is sure that sometimes, I remember, they had 2 tape recorders of high quality. They are half-inch tape recorder running at 76 centimeters by second, you know. It's like digital quality, nearly, you know. But these 2 tape recorders were on the first floor. There was possibility to plug them with the ground floor. So when I wanted to play back some tape from the top floor, I had to calculate how much time it would take me to come from the first floor to the ground floor to reach the mixing desk, and to put a tape long enough, silent tape long enough. Yeah. So many times during night I was starting the 2 tape recorders up there, running down, trying to get the console, but very often it did not work correctly, you know. So I was thinking, you know, if some little man from Mars planet, you know, some little green man would come visit the Earth, you know, and would put his nose from the garden and look at what is doing this guy, they would say, oh, you know, this is a primitive civilization. We have to go back to Mars, you know, because they are just totally primitive. So it is to the point that when Yoin was performed for the first time in Paris, all the team of Utrecht came especially to Paris to listen to the piece. And they all told me, you know, we cannot imagine that you alone have been doing all that work, because we know what is the work to do. And they were very surprised that I could master such a long work.
And to the first performance of your hymn, the intelligentsia, all the French intelligentsia came, Messiaen, Xenakis, Pierre-Henri, and what were the reactions about this first performance? For example, you say that Messiaen left after a while.
Yeah, you know, the first performance was not in Paris, it was in Bordeaux at Sylvain Festival.
Yes.
Yes. And there were many articles, enthusiast articles. Maurice Fleuret, the famous critic from Paris, wrote a very enthusiastic article, very long. You know. So when he decided to perform it in Paris, they all came because they read, they heard about these articles, and so they perhaps expect something more surrealistic or more crazy. But the presentation in Paris was in a theater quite improper, you know, a ground theater in a sort of arc like that. It was not the first class presentation. And well, I know Xenakis told me that he cannot support 4 hours of music non-stop. He told me, so I shall come once to hear part 1 and 2, and I shall come another time to hear parts 3 and 4. But he was very sincere. He told me that, and he did it, really.
And what do you think? Why was Messiaen, so to say, a little bit...
well, because they heard from that article by Maurice Fleuret that it was an important work. So anyway, they knew me since long, you know. And Messiaen knew me since the conservatory, you know. So he saw all my debut, you know. We were at the Domaine Musical program in the same concert, you know. So he liked to follow my evolution, my transformation, you know.
Yeah, sometimes in interviews he said to appreciate very much your music, and he
point
said
of view of time, you know.
You were one of the best composers of your generations, and he felt somehow an affinity to your music, for the colors and temporality.
Yeah. After a competition at the conservatory, he was my jury, and he came to speak with me because I had been composing on Persian
poetry.
Poetry, yes. I forgot Omar Khayyam.
Omar Khayyam.
Yeah, that's the name. Yes. And he was interested that I could compose on Eastern type of sources, and of course he was sensitive to the Eastern art, you know, since long time. And so, and certainly, I like very much Messiaen music, you know, and certainly there is in the time, you know, in Messiaen time, sometimes he really takes his time. You know, he's an organist, and the organ sound is an energy, like electronic music. Yes.
Yeah, now we have here organ and loudspeakers.
Yeah, but
and you say the electroacoustic music is sometimes the new organ music.
I believe, yes, I believe.
Can you explain that a little bit better?
Well, because the energy is, the type of energy suggests a certain behavior with sound, which doesn't need breathing or stopping, pushing something, doesn't need those respiration that the body or the muscle needs in ordinary acoustical music.
Well, but also because the modern organ functions with electricity, but in the past not. It was not the case because you needed someone.
Yeah, but there is a mechanical. So it's the same type of energy. It's a continuous energy, or with the idea of continuous energy. And so the musicians who understand organ take in charge that type of energy. And Messiaen music for organ is really taking in charge that type of energy, the same way as I try to take the electricity energy in my electronic composition. That's why I feel a certain proximity.
But actually, do you accept this expression that some people use to define you, the monk of the sound? Are you against it or?
No,
sympathize?
I don't refuse. This is what I became when I was working in Utrecht, really.
The monk of sound.
Oh, yeah. And I remember I had some conversation with the place where I was living, you know, a small student room, you know, and the owner was a young man, you know, and always seeing me coming back from the studio at 3 o'clock in the morning, full of papers, you know, and saying to me, but what do? You know, what is that? You know, you work always, Saturday, Sunday, you never stop. What is that? So I explained to him, you know, I have an electronic studio. It's so difficult to get an electronic studio permanently that I use the maximum of this studio to do the maximum of my force to produce my piece, you know. But then he had a modern concept, you know. He said that, you know, if you work so hard, then I'm going to hear this piece, you know, it's going to be performed. I said, well, it's not so sure. So he could not believe. But are you completely crazy? You work so hard and you are not sure you are going to be performed and to get success with it? You know, I said, well, that's the risk of modern music, you know. We do the effort and we are not sure of the success to come.
Yeah, in this sense, you have a kind of Zen Buddhistic approach to work, to music. This is in connection also with the presence of Martineau. And although you say you are atheist, you like very much religious people, so to say, with a religious devotion to work, and you like also monks, and you worked with Buddhistic monks, and that's true. Very unusual for a composer, and for electroacoustic composer. And you were so courageous to combine these words of the modernity, electroacoustic sounds, and these very archaic words of gagaku instruments and voices of Buddhistic monks. I would like to know something about your work with these monk solists from Anâhata. How did they react to your music? Did they perform without some being uncomfortable? How did they feel singing their, so to say, their own religious type of singing in combination with electroacoustic sounds?
No, it was a total. They are friends of mine, you know. They are still friends of mine, you know. It was a total understanding. It began first with À l'approche du feu méditant, when the National Theatre commissioned me this piece for gagaku orchestra and Buddhist monks. And then when I saw in the orchestra and the chorus who were the best performers for my next project, I selected them, and I said, so I shall take you for doing a piece with electroacoustic music. But I had to invent a machine because these people, they have difficulty to remember, and it's anyway very difficult to remember electronic music, complex electronic music. It's easy to remember a melody in a normal music, you know, but for myself, it's very difficult also to remember one of the Anâhata tape, you know. Sometimes I hesitate. So I had to invent a synchronization machine with a timing on their desk, you know, giving them the timing of the tape, you know, so that they can relate. One day this machine was broken, and at the end of the rehearsal they had 8 minutes of distance between what they were doing and what they had to do. So it seemed that this machine was very necessary. But they like very much electronic music, you know. They said, oh no, electronic music is cosmic, you know.
They could immediately
yes, they told me, because they have this relationship with sound and magic, you know. Particularly the Shingon monks. Shingon monks, they are tied to India. They use mantra, they use yantra, they use all these type of things. And sound for them has a power of magic, you know. And so they relate very easy with electronic world, you know, and for them it's also magic. And they don't make the difference between doing their traditional music, celebrating in the temple, and being interpreter of another music, you know, because they decided in the Shingon monks that this music they do, if they wanted to have this music surviving, they have to give it to the public. So they began to organize concert tour, theater tour. They came to Paris in the 70s before I composed for them. The Shingon monks, they gave at the Espace Cardin a whole show, you know, where they have books which they send, you know, you have seen that probably in Cologne, yes. So they have this social relationship. They want their music to go out of the temple and to be distributed to the public as a survival. Because they know if they keep that music in the temple, perhaps it's going to die.
Just a last question.
Yeah, please.
I would like that you answer very frankly about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, you know, a few months ago, Boulez disappeared.
Yeah.
When he was young, he wrote this famous article, Schönberg is dead.
Yeah.
Now many people
Want
you
to
know,
write Boulez is dead.
if he gone away, wrote Boulez is dead. And Boulez wrote also this other article as pendant of Boulez aimant, Stravinsky remains.
Yeah.
Now the question is, Boulez is dead.
Yeah.
What remains of him for you,
No, you know, I had.
for the music?
I told you I had a very excellent, friendly relationship with him when I was a student. You know, we had dinner together. We exchanged many ideas. We were nearly. It was not friendly because we always, in French, we always said vous. You know, so we never switched to the tu. When we are friends, we switch to the tu. You know, so we always said vous. So there was always this distance. The master and the student, you know. But he was very friendly. He helped me conducting my first pieces, and I owe to him the beginning of my career in Paris, for sure. You know, Equivalence was commissioned by him.
And dedicated.
Yeah, dedicated to him, it's normal. He told me, write me a piece, I shall conduct it in Darmstadt, etc. And so I owe to him a lot of things, you know. And I am very sorry that finally the debate became polemic because of this evolution, this incapacity of him to understand my evolution, and the distance which progressively manifests itself between his career of a conductor and my evolution towards electronic music, which are, of course, totally divergent, you know. And then the rupture came when I went to Tokyo to realize Gaku-no-Michi for an order of him for the Irkame, and that his surrounding made such a mistake that they eliminate me completely from that organization, you know. So I heard him, and we became we exchanged some polemic. It became public, you know. It became public, and journalists, of course, have been pushing maximum, you know, in that direction. Journalists are not very helpful to help people reconcile. Generally, they love, because they live from conflict, you know, and they would prefer to produce conflict than to try to resolve them. So I believe Boulez is a great composer, and a large part of his work is going to stay in history forever, because his action in the history of music is very important. In some way, as important as Stockhausen. That's why they both respect each other very much. You know. They are they are creating serialism in the 50s in Darmstadt, both together. That will remain forever. For me, his best accomplishment in composition is Pli selon Pli. Pli selon Pli is beginning of the 60s. After that, there is no one work of him which really starts my enthusiasm. His recent work, which is so much prized in Paris, Sur un Cis, for me it's like Boulez making a cartoon of Boulez, sort of caricature, yes, a caricature. It becomes so much maniac, So I much prefer, of course, the development of Stockhausen, which I choose later in my life as a model, which is richer, which is more open.
What remains of the music of Boulez today? Do you think that younger composers can learn something from music of Boulez for the future development or not?
Boulez was a perfectionist, so what we can learn of him is the exigencies of going to the maximum of perfection in one doing work. He was always correcting his music.
His frenzy of the detail.
Yeah. Well, to the point of maniac,
Yes.
Yeah, but I think his influence is not so big now because for many young composers, he is tied to serialism, post-serialism, and this is a little bit of the past. Only people who have not much capacity to evolve are keeping Boulez as a reference. Unfortunately, this is the large part of the establishment of music now, because they feel secure, they feel, we rely on the value of Boulez with value, classical value, serious value, and so they rely on that, and they have no open-mindedness for something else.
Well, I would like to conclude our conversations with the statement about a matter of fact. We could conclude in this way. Boulez is dead, Eloy remains.
Don't go on that road. Don't go on that road. I don't share such polemic.